Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much, Matt, for that very wonderful introduction. Let me first thank Pierre. Thank you very much for this wonderful invitation. I know it's been a long time coming, and we've been juggling dates, but I can't imagine a more fortuitous moment to be here in Montreal, so I very much thank you. Minister Hertel and Minister Murray and Secretary Rodriguez, and my very good friend. Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to see you, Pauline. We go back a while, and I must publicly confess that I am very, very jealous of you. The fact that you now have as much time as you do to devote to your wonderful family is my highest aspiration and ambition. So I will hopefully follow your path soon, as soon as we have a global agreement, right? And all of the other distinguished members of this fantastic table. I must confess to you, I just came from New York, and we had, for the first time in history, 120 heads of state in New York, under one roof, on one day, talking about one thing. So it was really a very, very unusual and a historic moment. But I guarantee that 120 heads of state in New York did not call forth as much protocol as I have seen this morning. So, since this is the Council on Foreign Relations, instead of going through everyone on this wonderful table and all our friends on the other tables, let me then reach out to Africa for their very wonderful tradition and just say, all protocol observed. And that then allows us to jump in. I'm delighted to be back in Montreal. I was here in 2005 for COP11, if anybody remembers that. And it was definitely a whole experience for me, which was both with a W and without a W. It was a whole experience because it was the moment in which we got very, very important decisions out of the Climate Convention for the market specifically. But it was also a whole without a W experience because I never got out of the hole, right? I was underground the whole time. It was December. I was down there, little tropical soul, right? And can you imagine? I never would have been able to do my, to breathe if I had come up. And so the fact that we walked, my good staff member and I, we walked over here this morning above ground was a total discovery. Oh my God, Montreal has an above ground reality. And it's full of bicycle paths and full of beautiful buildings. And it was actually a wonderful discovery to know that it's not just underground, but actually also an above ground city. So really quite wonderful. Now, my friends, how many of you were in New York? I keep on saying last week because it feels like, you know, it was such a packed week, but it was only this week. How many of you were in New York at some point in time this week? Okay, good. How many of you did the march? Okay, all right. So here's my sense of this amazing week. I have reached the conclusion that the ground on what is possible on climate change has tectonically shifted this week. And that is no exaggeration. And let me just give you a few little data points why I think that is the case. We started with the most amazing march on climate change that anyone has ever seen, okay? 400,000 people on the streets when the organizers and New York police expected 100,000. 400,000 people out on the street, excuse me, in New York, that is in the United States of America, okay? So that's actually pretty impressive. And not only that, but they actually were able to identify that at the same time, or at least on the same day, there were 162 countries in which there were over 2,600 different events, some marches, some meetings, etc. 2,600 events on climate change around the world in 162 countries, including Canada. I mean, this is really fantastic, right? We have never seen as much public support for climate action than we saw on Sunday. Then we move forward, and from Monday to Tuesday, what I see in front of me is, without exception, every single sector that has some responsibility in greenhouse gas emissions is actually coming forward very clearly to say, we can do something about this. Every single sector. So I saw the forestry sector come forward with 150 partners from government, non-government, private sector, IGOs, NGOs, everybody, come forward and say, you know what? We're committing to one half the loss of deforestation by 2020. I saw 24 of the largest corporations that source palm oil. Believe you me, these corporations are responsible for 90% of the things we eat, use, et cetera, consumer goods form. They come forward and they said, we are committed to sourcing palm oil from zero net deforestation by 2020. Zero net deforestation. A huge shift in the world of what deforestation is going to be like, because we will see a reduction, dramatic reduction. I saw an alliance that came forward to put quite a few different measures in place to ensure that we're going to have climate-smart agriculture benefiting how many? 500 million farmers around the world. 500 million farmers who will be moving into smart agriculture practices. I saw a very important coalition of transport-related companies and governments and subnationals moving forward on what they're going to be doing on transport. I heard a resounding commitment to double energy efficiency and triple renewable energy around the world. And very importantly, which continent is the one that is most energy hungry and energy starved? Africa. And so I heard a commitment to 8,000 kilometers of an energy corridor in Africa with renewable energy running through that corridor. An amazing transformation for Africa, an amazing uplift for those populations in particular that don't have energy, and that those that do are using very dirty energy. Who would have thunk? Oil and gas companies, okay? A coalition of 6 of the major oil and gas companies coming forward and saying, we're part of the problem, but we could also be part of the solution. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to put forward our best practices. We're going to begin reporting. We're going to help each other because we also need to be there. They understand that they need to be a part of this solution. And then, of course, 2,000 cities, and I cannot tell you how many subnational governments coming forward, starting with Governor Brown, who did a fantastic job and had, the halls just riveting with his vision for what California can do. So a very, very exciting week from a sector perspective. But this is not just what the sectors can do, this is actually also what money is going to pay for. So the question, of course, was, and is the financial sector going to be there? With a resounding yes, they were there. So I heard institutional investors say that they're going to decarbonize $100 billion and disclose the carbon footprint of $500 billion that they have under management. Well, I heard 3 of the largest pension funds come and say they're going to accelerate their low carbon investments to the tune of more than $31 billion by 2020. We had a very impressive coalition of insurance industry. Is there any industry that is more on the line for survival than the insurance and reinsurance industry? None. They're coming forward, of course, because out of their own self-interest, they are taking their assets in addition to creating a whole bunch of very, very interesting new insurance products to increase resilience in the countries that are being most hit. But in addition to that, taking their own assets and moving those, doubling over the next 15 months, their assets in green investments from 40 to 80 billion, and then putting that up tenfold by 2020. We heard 73 when it was announced, but by last night it was 75. Governments come forward and say, we want carbon pricing. Added to that, 1,000 corporations, 11 regions, some of them sitting right here, thank you very much, saying we want carbon pricing. Either we have it or we want it, but we sure as well need it. A very, very important statement to be making at the United Nations in front of that very powerful group of private and public sector. And then, anybody know where the Rockefeller wealth came from? Don't tell me. Rockefeller Brothers Fund announces in the middle of all of this that they're actually going to divest their assets from fossil fuels. Now, there is something in the air, right? There is something in the air when Rockefeller Brothers Fund comes out and says that. So very, very exciting. And then yesterday, just to have you note that this was actually a New York and Montreal arc of possibility that was being drawn here. Yesterday, PRI here in Montreal announcing their Montreal carbon pledge, and I just came from over there, and I think I left quite a few carcasses on the table because they were very, very proud of the fact that their current target is to disclose 3 billion of the assets that they have in under management. And I said in what, trillion, I forgot a couple of zeros there. 3 trillion of the assets that they have under management under equities. And my question to them was, and what happens to the other 19? Because they actually have 22 trillion in equities under management. So my charge to them was, can we put PRI on steroids, the Montreal carbon pledge on steroids, and get to the 22? Because, my friends, that is what it's going to take. So a very, very exciting week where truly the ground has shifted dramatically and irreversibly. I drew 3 conclusions from that. I concluded after this amazing week that everyone has finally understood that we absolutely must address climate change. Everyone, every sector, every stakeholder, every level of government, everybody has understood that we must address climate change. I didn't hear one say no. My second conclusion is that there's an astonishing agreement that has been percolating, but that was really visible now this week. There's an astonishing recognition that this is not a federal government problem or a federal government solution. This cannot be done exclusively by national governments. Now, I have the honor and privilege of supporting what national governments do, and I will both support and criticize what they will do in a few minutes. But the important thing is that over the past 4 to 5 years, there has been a very important movement on the part of national governments that have realized, you know, when I got to the Secretariat, there was a P word that was taboo, and that was the private sector. It could not be mentioned. It didn't appear in any text, let alone cities or subnational governments, right? That's like way, way down the line. Well, today, there is a very resounding and very, very deep understanding that this is not a national government issue, that this is an every person issue, it's an every level of government issue, it's an every corporation issue, it's an every sector issue. So that, let me say, the democratization of both the problem and the solution is something that was very, very clear in New York, and one that I was very grateful for. And my third conclusion out of New York is that everyone has decided that this is irreversible. The move toward low-carbon economy is now not only certain, but it is irreversible. Because otherwise, why would the oil and gas companies be coming forward? Why would Rockefeller Brothers Fund be divested. Proof is in the pudding, or in the barrel, whichever way you want to say. So all of those are actually very good news, right? Very good news. Now, one could end there and say, okay, fine, all is done, go home. Or go to your family, which is what I would love to do. Not that easy, because let me put forward for you where we are in the formal process. Everything that happened in New York was fantastic, and it is not part of the formal process. The formal process that negotiates an agreement for Paris among the 194 governments is one that is on track and is parallel to what happened in New York. And the biggest challenge here is how you dovetail those two things. So get ready, because I will have a request for all of you to help me dovetail those two. But in the meantime, let me just get your motors started. The formal process looks like this. We will be hosting, organizing, et cetera, the Lima, Peru conference at the end of this year. What governments have agreed to among themselves is that in Lima, they will be looking at, considering, reviewing, et cetera, what they call elements of a draft agreement. And elements is the word that they use. That's the word that is in the text. And you know, in the United Nations, whatever's in the text is more sacred than in the Bible or the Quran. So the elements of the text is what they have committed to. The COP president, the Peruvian Minister of Environment, has been very clear in saying, I don't want elements of a text. I want the draft text. That's what I want. I want a full draft. So he has put the challenge out. And he has said, you know what? We've been working on this for a long time. It is time. We are not going to repeat the Copenhagen nightmare where we went without a legal text. I want a full text on the table in Lima so that everybody has a whole year to sit on it, you know, paint it, whatever, you do whatever you need to do. But let's have a full year to do that so that we can adopt it in Paris. So let us give them the benefit of the doubt. They will have a draft agreement in Lima. They will do something else that is very important from the perspective of Montreal. They will also come to the final conclusion on how are they, please don't fall out of your chairs when I say this, how are they going to recognize efforts that are not the efforts of national governments? How about that? So it's taken a while, but they have understood that they need all the help they can get, frankly, and that there are corporations, there are sectors, there's subnational governments, there's cities, there's everything. Everybody in the world is actually really wanting to help here. And they have finally realized this, and they're going to be reaching an agreement among each other, which, by the way, is not easy to do, okay? Because there's not unanimous enthusiasm for this. And so it is a very, very difficult process that they will have to engage in, but one that they are committed to, and one that we are certainly very much supporting and preparing, in fact, already some, let's call it beta versions or, you know, straw man or whatever you want to call it, that we will put in front of them, because we don't decide, they decide. But we do have the sense that if we put something in front of them, they could focus on that, and they would say, well, we don't like this, take this out, add this, but at least they have something to focus on. And they don't have to go into the default thinking of that this is impossible. So that will be a very, very important deliverable from Lima that I am fully committed to supporting to its happy end. And if we don't get everything we want in Lima, we will have to continue next year. But we're going to push for the most recognition that we can in Lima under the political circumstances that we have. And please don't interpret that there's only one country. There are actually quite a few countries that have a very, very difficult time with this. So we will be encouraging and making it a little bit easier for them to take that very, very important decision. From there, we all sleep for about one day, and then we go to March. In March, countries, all national governments have committed to come forward and send to the Climate Secretariat, to us, their contributions, because they are currently doing their national homework. Each one internally is looking at, from a technological, economic, and political perspective, how much can they do, how can they contribute to the solution, both on reducing emissions and on increasing resilience. And so that is going to come forward in March. And we will be receiving that, and we will then be making that available to all governments, because they will then take about 3 to 6 months to look over each other's shoulders and give each other comments. Well, I think you should do a little bit more here, you know, all the different sort of calibrating conversations that they will do to ensure that everybody is there according to their responsibility and their capacity to contribute to the solution. So a very, very important opportunity for everyone, for subnationals in particular, to encourage their federal governments, their national governments, to come forward with what subnationals already know that they can do. Here's the thing. Those INDCs, I'm sorry to hit you with an acronym there, but those nationally determined contributions must reflect what subnationals are already doing and what subnationals know that they're going to be able to do. And that is a very important opportunity, right? Because the national governments shouldn't be backed against the wall because they don't think that they can contribute. They will have somebody breathing down their neck. Their trading partners will all be breathing down their neck. So frankly, here's a very interesting opportunity for those governments to reach out to subnationals and go, I have to put something on the table. Can you help me out? That would be a very, very important strategic opportunity that should not be missed. From there, we go then, meanwhile, while they're still looking at their numbers, with their other hand and the other part of their brain, they are also finalizing the text. So we will get them together for a couple of times next week so that they can look at what came out of Lima and they can work through issues of contention, options that will be on the table, and produce by April 15th the cleanest possible draft text. Very different to the process that we had in Copenhagen. Very, very different. And then after that, we take that text, we translate it into 6 languages of the United Nations, and we send it out to every single country. Now, take note. This agreement has such an impact on so many different sectors in every single country that it is impossible for any minister single-handedly to be able to judge that agreement. I am very certain that that agreement will go to the cabinets and will be subjected to a multi-sectoral discussion. A multi-sectoral discussion. Because whatever is there is going to affect agriculture, it's going to affect transportation, certainly going to affect energy, it's going to affect building policy, it's going to affect, did I say transportation? It's going to affect health, you name it, right? That agreement is going to have an impact on most of the ministers that are sitting there, if not all. And it will certainly have an impact on the fundamental responsibility that a government has, all of the ministers together, which is to ensure the well-being of their population, not over an electoral cycle, but in the long term. So that is probably the most important cabinet decision that every single cabinet in this world will have. Most important cabinet meeting and most important decision that will occur next year, because the impact of that is going to affect the quality of life of all of us for the next 30 to 50 years. That is a conversation that you should be preparing now. That is a conversation that you should ensure that the ministers of energy are well-versed. All ministers of energy should be well-versed. Every single sector. If you have access to anyone there, any minister in any of these portfolios, That is a conversation that needs to be prepared ahead of time. They can't start when the document is put, oh, wait a minute, where was climate change? Where is the IPCC website? No, then it's too late. Okay, they need to understand what the impact is for their own country, and above all, they need to understand what huge opportunity stands in front of them. Because there is a huge opportunity. There's no doubt that climate is the biggest threat that we've ever faced in the history of mankind, but it is also the biggest opportunity that we've ever been given. And they have to understand that. And then, my friends, we go from hopefully 194 very, very good cabinet discussions, we go to Paris. And in Paris, they will adopt an agreement that needs to not only gather and recognize all of the action that is already underway, because a lot is tip of the iceberg in New York, but a lot more under that iceberg tip. So they need to not only recognize all the action that is already underway, but they need that agreement. We the world, we the planet, need that agreement to chart the course of development, not for 5 or 10 years, but for 30 to 50 years. Because it is that longevity, it is that long-term direction that is actually going to be able to shift capital markets, to incentivize investment in renewables, to shift the concentration on research and development. That is what it's really going to take. It's not a 5 to 10 year period. This goes way beyond the electoral cycle of anyone. That's a really tough ask, right? Because all of these people are there for their electoral cycles, but they need to stand up as statesmen as they are and understand that what is at stake here is nothing other than the future of humanity, without exaggeration. Without exaggeration. We hear a lot in the press and in science about the very dangerous tipping points that runaway climate could have, and how if we don't address climate in a timely way, read 2015, that we would actually be in the situation in which we would get into tipping points of the natural cycles that would turn us over into systemic disruption and risk, the likes of which we've never seen, and the likes of which we don't want to see. All of that is projected by science, and it is true. However, what I think is much more compelling is that not only are we facing a tipping point, we're actually on the verge of a turning point. And that turning point is mankind's ability to face the challenges that we have in front of us once we understand the circumstances and once we understand the impact that we're going to have if we don't do so. So to understand the opportunity that climate change brings to us by making the right decisions, by making the right investments, by taking the right policy decisions, by putting together the package of policy and financing incentives that need to be, we have a major, major opportunity here. I keep on calling him Senator Kerry. Secretary Kerry stood up in the United Nations a few days ago and called the transformation that we will see, because we will see it in the energy market, he called it the mother of all markets. The mother of all markets. And what that's going to bring, not only in terms of energy stability, but in terms of job creation, in terms of responsible use of our resources, it is really beyond anything that we have ever seen. And this is an opportunity we cannot afford to miss. So that takes me to Quebec. And I thank you very much for this opportunity to be here again. I really want to pay tribute to the fact that here in Quebec you have been able to have a stable climate policy and climate support no matter what the results of elections have been. And Madam, you are a testament to that, but you are in a row of leaders who have really ensured that the well-being of your people and of the world comes before politics. And I really pay tribute to Quebec for that. For your ETS, And of course, the excitement that Matt has already put out, the exciting, not just the linking of the ETS systems, but the joint auction that you will have in November. I assure you, the eyes of the carbon market world are zeroed in here. And we will all be watching with a lot of excitement and support to you. And thank you very much for doing that. And so here's the problem. Whenever I get up to speak, I can't sit down without asking for help. So here's my request to all of you. In fact, it's 3 requests, okay? The first request is actually easy. They get progressively more difficult, don't worry. The first request is in this fantastically bilingual city and region, you would do everyone a huge favor by offering French immersion immediately to all of us who will have to spend most of our lives in Paris next year and who do not speak a word of French. So you're already one up on everybody else who's going to be in Paris. My second request is for all of you, Quebec, Ontario, and California, sitting here right next to each other, and others. But you really have been in the lead of this, and you have international world recognition. So I really thank you for that. And it is not enough, okay? I have to tell you, there is no country that is doing enough. There is no region that is doing enough. There's no corporation that is doing enough. There's no individual that is doing enough. Because if you think that you are doing personally enough on climate change, then please stand up. And I will continue speaking so that you don't have to stand up, because even I would not be able to say that I'm doing enough, okay? We all have to do so much more. So to our wonderful leaders here in Quebec, in Ontario, and in California, my request is that you continue to work with one another, with your provincial partners, with your trading partners outside of your national boundaries, to continue to weave this very, very important web that is actually the one that I am convinced is going to take us forward. And I think there are more and more national governments that are realizing that. Because another big lesson learned from Copenhagen, in addition to it's really stupid to put 300 pages in front of presidents in the last minute and give them a red pen, in addition to that lesson learned, another big lesson learned in Copenhagen is, you know what? We did not have enough of a basis, enough of a structure upon which to build a global policy framework. We just didn't have it. And so it's almost, you know, like we brought this gorgeous dome and said, okay, we're going to drop it right now, but where are the columns? Whoops, no columns. Well, of course it dropped and shattered, right? The fact that you are building the kind of relationships and the kind of economic and technological webbing that you are building with each other is really the pillars. Those are the pillars upon which we will be able to build an international policy framework based on national legislation, of which there are 500 climate change laws already in place, also very different from Copenhagen, but based on subnational city, corporate, and sectoral work. So I know it's really difficult. I really, really commend you for having taken that step in the face of precisely all of my good friends in the UNFCCC who said, no, this is national government stuff. Well, I am very, very grateful to you that you did not listen to that message and that you moved forward, all of you and so many other provinces, cities, and regions to really put together the kind of intricate policy and financial infrastructure that will be able to hold an international infrastructure that will then be in place in Paris. And my third request is the most difficult one. My third request is not to give up on national governments. And I know that it's very tempting to just go, oh, come on, you know, we're not even going to talk to them anymore. Here's the truth. The transformation that we're going to see in the energy sector and in so many other attendant sectors is so huge that we cannot afford to leave anyone behind. No family can be left behind, no community, no city, no region, no province, no state, no country can be left behind. Because if anybody is left behind, they will be condemned to living with the consequences of an economy that frankly has seen the end of its life. We cannot afford that. From an economic imperative point of view, from a moral imperative point of view, everybody has to come on board. Everybody. And that is from the United States down to Tuvalu. Everybody. They have to all come on board. From China to Nauru or Costa Rica in my case. Everybody has to come on board. Now, not everybody can get on board at the same time, okay? Everybody has different realities. But that conversation, because you in particular in this room understand so deeply the compelling arguments why we're doing this. Yeah, maybe we're also doing it to save the planet, but fundamentally, we're doing it because it is in our direct interest, and we all understand that. And thank heavens that that is that way, because that is the most compelling driver that we can possibly have. So those of you who understand that need to build a bridge toward those that have not understood that yet, and continue to hold an open door policy and an open ear to those who are still struggling to understand that. Because there's no doubt that we will be able to move quicker and more efficiently and at less cost if we have a coherence that is integrated all the way from the top all the way to the bottom. So to not work in that coherence, you can still move forward, but it is not your most cost-effectively manner in which to move forward. So I would ask you to still maintain that open ear, because no one can be left behind. And I am reminded of how many beautiful scenes I have seen in African villages where there is no electricity, no running water, and where women and men, but in this case I'm thinking of several times that I've seen women come out of their little homes with their cell phones, doing their thing, right? The cellular telephony revolution that we have seen over the past 10 years is absolutely fantastic, because it has brought the developing world on board and allowed them to pursue independence and development that they would never have been able to do. But the energy revolution that we are facing and that we have already started to engage in goes way beyond cell phones. And that is truly what is going to get everybody on board being a productive citizen of this world, creating more jobs, creating more markets, and actually proving that this is not about sharing the burden. This is not about cutting up a pie and who's going to pay for which part of the pie. This is about baking a new pie of opportunity where everyone will have their place. Everyone, including the 2 billion that are soon going to be with us on this planet. So we cannot afford to leave everyone behind. No one can be left behind. Africa cannot be left behind. Canada cannot be left behind. The United States, Costa Rica, Tuvalu, European Union, you name it. Nobody can be left behind. We all have to march together forward into a completely different economy that we're all seeing, but that we must guarantee that we move into. And thank you, Leonard Cohen, because everybody knows. Everybody knows that climate is changing. We all do. Everybody knows that we have to address climate and that we must do it. Everybody knows that we can do it. Everybody knows that we have the solutions, the financial and the technical. And everybody knows, deep in your heart, everybody knows that we have a choice about the future, not about whether we're going to have a future. I have news for you. The future is going to happen anyway, whether you know it or not, whether you believe that or not. The future is going to happen anyway. We have a choice. Are we going to have a future by default, or are we going to have a future by design? That is our choice. And frankly, we are called to make that choice profoundly intentionally. Profoundly intentionally. Because we will be moving into the low-carbon society. We will, because it's irreversible by now. But we will move there either by crashing into physics, because at some point we will just not be able to maintain an economic structure that supports the kind of impacts that we're going to have. So we're either going to crash into physics, or we're actually going to develop the policies. We will move into the low-carbon society either by physics or by policy. And everybody knows that it is in everybody's interest for us to move into that future by design, by policy, in an orderly way that allows for the evolution of policies, of incentives, and for the well-being of those who are most vulnerable, which is our moral imperative. So I thank you for everything that you're all doing. You wouldn't be here if you weren't at least curious about these topics, but maybe you wouldn't be here because, if you weren't committed to this. And I believe that that is why you are here, because you are committed, because you know that we're doing something, we, the royal we, the planetary we, we're doing something, but we're not doing enough. And we all have to do so much more, because we have 15 months. I really want to leave, in the end, a note of urgency with you. We have 15 months to get this right. Science is very, very clear in saying we have to stay under the 2 degrees. And if we don't reach global peaking in the next 10 years, and then come down dramatically to the point in which we are balancing our emissions with our natural capacity to absorb, call it zero net, call it climate neutrality, call it whatever you want, but the balance, if we don't do that, we will be moving into the tipping point that that is very even difficult to quantify. And the only way to do that, says science, not Christiana Figueres, says science, is actually to truly have the regulation in place that will allow that global peaking over the next 10 years. In 2015, if we do not get an impactful agreement in 2015, I tell you, it's going to take the world another 10 years to come around the table again. I had the pleasure of picking up this process where it was in the garbage can after Copenhagen. And it has taken me 4.5 years, almost going on 5 now, to bring the mood of the world around. Fortunately helped with a lot of people, such as this packed room, because it takes everyone here. We're now at the point where we can all agree, everybody knows, this is possible. But if we don't do it in Paris, my friends, if we don't do it in Paris, I guarantee not only do we have economic disruption, but we have a political crisis that it will take at least 10 years to bring everybody again around the table to one agreement that is going to set the course. So my friends, if you thought that you have done a lot on climate change, you probably have, and I thank you. But in Durban, I heard children, fourth grade children, stand up and tell us all, do more, do more, do more. And when you have done everything you can, do more. Thank you.
Thank you very much.